The following program is being brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit VoiceAmericaVariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in live Internet talk radio. Visit VoiceAmerica.com. The views and ideas expressed in the following program are strictly those of the hosts or guests and do not necessarily reflect the views and ideas held by the Voice America Talk Radio Network, its staff, and management.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Relationship Radio with your host, Jim Duzak. Are you interested in marriage, divorce, midlife dating? Keep it tuned right here for the next hour as Jim and his guest explore some fascinating and important topics. Now, here's your host, Jim Duzak.
Hello, and welcome to Relationship Radio. I'm Jim Duzak. I'm a divorce lawyer and mediator, a columnist for ConnectionsForWomen.com and BoomerLiving.com, and the author of the book Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment. At one time, I even owned a dating service. You can learn more about me if you'd like by visiting my website, www.attorneyatlove.com. This is not a call-in show, but I do love to hear from listeners. So if you have a question, a comment, or a suggestion, please email me at jim@attorneyatlove.com, and I'll do my best to get back to you the same day. I'd also like to mention that if you're listening to this live, the show you're listening to will be in the Voice America archives by tomorrow night, along with all the previous Relationship Radio shows. The previous ones are up there already. But this show will be in the archives as of about 7 o'clock tomorrow night, Saturday night, May 9th. So if you want to listen to today's show again, or listen to any of the earlier shows you might have missed, or to download this or any other show in MP3 form, just go to www.voiceamerica.com and enter either my name, Jim Duzak, or the name of the show, Relationship Radio, in the search field, and you'll find it. Our guest today is Susan Kuchinskis. Susan is one of America's top medical, scientific, and technology writers. She writes regularly for WebMD, and her work has appeared in numerous print publications as well, including Wired and Time magazine. Although Susan is not a relationship writer in the usual sense, she has a new book out that sheds a lot of light on a so-called feel-good chemical that can greatly affect the way we experience romance, sexual pleasure, and committed love. The book is called The Chemistry of Connection: How the Oxytocin Response Can Help You Find Trust, Intimacy, and Love. And for those of you who may be taking notes, oxytocin is spelled OXYTOCIN. Susan's book has been getting great reviews, both from professionals in the scientific community and from lay people who are simply interested in knowing more about the natural chemicals and hormones that are flowing through our bodies. Susan's website is www.hugthemonkey.com, and I'll spell that too, HUGTHEMONKEY.com. And you can use that website to contact Susan if you'd like. Susan, welcome to Relationship Radio.
Hey, thanks so much, Jim. Great to be here.
Well, it's really great to have you, Susan, and I just wanted to say I'm a charter member, I think, of the Susan Kuchinskis fan club. I really, in all seriousness, I really enjoyed reading your book, and I'm somebody without any scientific background beyond high school biology class. So, really, if you can keep me reading, you really have quite a talent for making scientific concepts understandable, but without dumbing them down.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you, Jim. I mean, it's still very exciting to me because the book just came out, so it's great to hear that. I want to say I don't have any more scientific background than you do, so people shouldn't be afraid to read the book. I write about technology a lot, so I've learned to talk to very smart people who know kind of obscure stuff and kind of get at, what does this mean for me? Mm-hmm. And that's what I try to do in the book.
Well, you've certainly done a good job of it, because I've read some of the reviews of your work, and there are some very impressive people with PhD credentials in the scientific world that are saying the same things I'm saying. So it's very impressive.
Well, you're very kind.
Thank you. But, Susan, over the last, 15 years or so, you've written literally hundreds of articles on many different subjects. But what was it about oxytocin that made you want to, in effect, drop everything and write a book about it?
Okay, that's a great question. Well, as a journalist, I can find interest in almost anything. It's always fun to talk to anybody who knows stuff and is smart.
Mm-hmm.
And I've written a lot about business and technology, and I'm an avid user of technology, so I enjoy it. But when I found out about oxytocin, it was just a huge aha for me, because it was something that really explained a lot about my personal life and my personal relationships. And authors always say this, but honestly, I felt it was so important that people know about this that I really wanted to write a book. And of course, it was exciting that nobody else had written about it, and I was like, why not?
It really is true that authors always, unless it's just a commissioned book that you're paid, X number of dollars to write on a certain subject, the mere fact of the choice of subject reveals a lot about the author.
Yes.
So that's always the case. But I'm just curious to know: did it have to do with the issues of commitment and love and things of that nature? Did you start seeing things about your own life?
Absolutely, Jim. I mean, I am somebody who never had, a long-term relationship lasting more than a year until I was, 43.
Oh, really?
Yes. I had one relationship early on that went for 4 years, but it was, very fractious and difficult, on-off kind of thing. I so desperately, wanted love. I really wanted a relationship, and it just didn't happen. I went through the whole cycle of, a couple dates. Oh, I think he's great, and then I don't hear from him again, or, a couple months, and then we just look at each other and go, ooh.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was so frustrated, I was so unhappy and so lonely, and I finally just took a break from love, and around that time I was lucky enough to be able to buy my first home.
Mm-hmm.
So I just spent a couple years, fixing up my house. I had pets, making a home for myself, and then I fell in love. And I fell in love in a different way than I ever had before. And, that was 14 years ago, and we're still together. And I was trying to understand, how did this happen? I thought this would never happen. I'm glad it happened, but how? And the oxytocin response and how it develops and how it plays out in our lives.
It helped to explain some of that.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell us exactly what oxytocin is and why we should know about it?
Sure. Okay, oxytocin is both a hormone that travels through our bloodstream and does all sorts of wonderful things for our bodies. It speeds healing. It enables us to relax. It also is involved in sexual function. It creates erection and helps facilitate orgasm. At the same time, it's a neurochemical. That is a chemical that acts in our brain to transmit nerve impulses. And what oxytocin seems to do in the brain is it seems to be the transmitter of signals having to do with positive human emotion, trust, generosity, bonding, the love of a mother for her child, the love of a father for his child, the love of two people, friendship, kind of any kind of bonding or trust is the result of oxytocin.
I see.
Yeah.
I want to clarify one thing. Are there many substances in the body that are both hormones and chemicals? Because I often hear of chemicals and I hear of hormones. In other words, estrogen, I guess, is an example of a hormone, right? Or testosterone.
No, this is a great question because that's a really muddy and confusing issue. In fact, most of the chemicals that are hormones are also neurotransmitters. For example, estrogen, we think of it as a sex hormone, but actually they're realizing now that it's very, very important for cognitive function in the brain. And there have actually been studies shown that women who go on HRT for a short period after menopause retain better cognitive function after menopause. So testosterone is another one that acts in the brain as a neurotransmitter. So hormone you think of as something that acts on the physical organs in the body. Neurotransmitter acts in the brain to help, manage nerve traffic. And there are very, very many that do both.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. Oxytocin seems like Again, I'm a layperson here, but I read newspapers and magazines like anybody else, and until your book came along, maybe I had seen the term somewhere, but I get the impression it's a relatively little understood thing. Has it only recently been discovered?
Well, it's interesting. Oxytocin was actually the first hormone to be discovered back at the turn of the 19th century. Veterinarians realized that it could speed labor in animals. They would grind up pituitary gland from sheep and give it to animals if they were having trouble in labor. So for a long time, they thought that oxytocin was a female hormone that was important for labor and birth and breastfeeding. And then in the early 90s, Sue Carter and Thomas Insull and Larry Young discovered that it was very important in bonding for these little mammals called the voles. Mm-hmm. A vole is like a little mouse, and there are two kinds of voles. Well, there are many kinds of voles, but these guys looked at the prairie vole, which is monogamous. It mates for life, and the father helps raise the family, and they like to stay together in a little family huddle. And then there's the mountain vole, and they are promiscuous. The male and female copulate, then he goes off, she goes off and takes care of the babies. And they found that in the females, blocking the effects of oxytocin in the monogamous prairie vole female would keep her from being monogamous.
Huh.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. And they did various other experiments trying to figure out how this worked. Was it involved in paternal behavior? And it seemed to be. But then about 4 or 5 years ago, there started to be human experiments. They did, typically scientists are so careful, it takes years, now we tried it this way, now we'll do it just slightly different. But some scientists, Paul Zak, who's at Claremont Graduate University, and Marcus Heinrichs, who's at the University of Zurich, they gave some male subjects oxytocin. The male subjects inhaled the oxytocin, and they tested their behaviors. So this started a lot of really exciting human research, and it turns out that humans are pretty much like the prairie vole in that way. Oxytocin, they haven't really, blocked it to see if it keeps us from bonding, but they have found that... Do I need to wrap up?
What's that?
Oh, they found that inhaling oxytocin actually increases positive social behavior.
That is really interesting. We've got to take a short break here, but when we come back, I really want to ask you more about not only bonding, but about monogamy and mating for life,
yes.
All things of that nature. We'll be right back with more insights from our guest, medical and science writer Susan Kuchinskis. This is Relationship Radio, and I'm Jim Duzak.
Ask the experts. Call toll-free right now, 1-866-472-5787. And ask our All-Star team to answer your question. That's 1-866-472-5787.
Thank you for calling.
VoiceAmerica.com.
Hi, I'm Jim Duzak, host of Voice America's Relationship Radio. I'm the author of a book called Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment. It's a book that deals not only with divorce, but with how to enhance your marriage and possibly avoid divorce. Every chapter of the book contains real-world information and advice on issues like sex, money, communication, in-law problems, and the temptation to have an affair. For those thinking of separating or filing for divorce, the book explains how to do it the right way. It also deals with the critical issues of life after divorce, including when to start dating again and how to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. If you visit my website, www.attorneyatlove.com, you can read excerpts from all 17 chapters of the book. If you'd like to order the book, the site has direct links to Amazon.com and the other major online booksellers. And you can use the site to contact me. I'd love to hear from you.
The latest business information is made simple with the Voice America Business Network. The professionals in the business world bring you live talk radio shows featuring an array of business topics, strategies for building wealth, sales and marketing, stock trading, investing, and business technology. Voice America Business hosts are professionals in their fields and bring to the airwaves weekly business discussions that offer up-to-date information, advice, and education. The Voice America Business Network, the bottom line in business talk. Want to have behind-the-scenes access to some of the greatest minds of today? On Shift in Action, we feature leading-edge innovators who are building a more conscious, sustainable, and healthy culture. Host Stephen Dinan offers live shows with evolutionary leaders such as Deepak Chopra, Van Jones, and others who are creating new paradigms for conscious living. You can keep your finger on the pulse of the latest frontier work with our weekly transmission of Inspired Wisdom on Shift in Action, broadcast live every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Pacific Time, noon Eastern Time on Voice America. Stimulating talk.
It gets those synapses in the brain firing really fast.
All the time. The #1 Internet talk station where your opinion counts. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Relationship Radio with your host, Jim Duzak, an inside look at marriage, divorce, and midlife dating. Now, back to Jim Duzak.
Welcome back. We're talking today with Susan Kuchinskis, author of The Chemistry of Connection, How the Oxytocin Response Can Help You Find Trust, Intimacy, and Love. And I think I mentioned, but in case I didn't, Susan's website, and by the way, it's a very good one, is www.hugthemonkey.com. Susan, before the break, you were talking about some of the... I forget, what's the third? Desert voles or some kind of vole?
Yes, the prairie voles and the mountain
prairie
voles.
That's right. Which is a mammal that, at least in one form, one type of prairie vole mates for life. But when I read your book, I was fascinated to see that the term mating for life does not necessarily mean what most of us think it means. I took it for granted that meant lifelong monogamy, but apparently scientists say otherwise. What does mating for life mean?
Okay, when scientists talk about it, they talk about social monogamy, which means mating for life, cohabiting with one mate for life, and cooperating to raise the children. So you live your life in the social family group, and unless something happens to your mate, that family group includes your mate. However, it does not mean pure sexual fidelity. It's so there we have the monogamous prairie voles, these little mice, right? How smart are they? How much, intellect or choice do they have? We like to think of animals as being very hardwired for stuff, but even in this monogamous species, as many as 30% engage in what scientists politely call extra-pair copulation.
Another way of saying a fling.
Yes.
Would it be, and I'm just curious, is it mainly the male of the species or both?
Well, it takes two.
Well, that's true. You're right.
Yeah, so it may be, while the male is out getting food, another male comes into the nest and has a quickie with the female vole, or maybe the female is out foraging and comes across an attractive male vole. But so that would be, of 30 to 40% of the females and the males do that. And, so it's very controversial, are humans a monogamous species or not? And people, seem to think, well, if we're monogamous, how can we possibly bear to have sex outside the relationship, or why do we get divorced? But it's more complicated than that.
I think you said in your book that oxytocin makes us, this is probably oversimplifying, but makes us want to be monogamous or holds people in a monogamous pair.
I don't think that's oversimplification. I think that's it. I mean, it's like amazing. Could it be that simple? But I think that's it, Jim.
And how exactly does that work? What's the process going on?
Well, what seems to be the case is scientists think that overall about 3% of mammals are monogamous, socially monogamous. And what seems to be the case is the specific pattern of receptors in the brain for oxytocin and dopamine. Now, dopamine is another neurochemical. It's the neurochemical of excitement, goal-seeking, and reward. And what they think happens is that monogamous mammals in their brains, in the social area of the brain, the part of the brain that processes any kind of, recognition, relationship with another, the dopamine and the oxytocin receptors are together. So when I have sex, I feel, God, that was great. I loved having sex. It felt good. But I also tie that to my social memory of the other person. Sex felt good with you. I want to do it with you again. Whereas in the non-monogamous mammals, the social recognition and the reward receptors are separate. So, sex was good. I need to do it again. Who can I do it with this time? Does that make sense?
Yes, well, it certainly makes sense as you're explaining it. And is oxytocin produced as much in men as in women in general? I realize there are variations from person to person, but looking at the male population, I'm talking about humans now as a whole. Do men produce oxytocin in the same doses or quantities that women do?
It's good to clarify and always mention that there's such a wide diversity in individuals, whether you're talking about humans or prairie voles. But yes, they absolutely do. I mean, we seem to think, women oxytocin, men testosterone, women want to nest, men want to have sex. But in fact, men do produce as much in general as women do. The difference is, in the brain, estrogen seems to enhance the bonding effects of oxytocin, whereas testosterone tends to mute them. So we both have as much, men and women have as much oxytocin circulating in their brains, but the effect seems to wane faster in men and is not as strong. Yeah.
Well, that's it. You mentioned at one point in some experiments, I think you were saying, where people were given some kind of a nasal spray or something or other that had oxytocin in it. Does that mean that oxytocin is available in some kind of manufactured form or pharmacological form?
No. Well, actually, in Europe, there is an oxytocin spray that's prescribed for pregnant women, but these are laboratory studies, and the scientists have to jump through some hoops and get FDA approval to allow them to provide this. And I believe that what they use is laboratory-grade oxytocin that they purchase specially for this purpose, and then they mix it with distilled water. So, and there are some clinical studies going on right now using oxytocin to treat various, things like social anxiety disorder. And pharmaceutical companies are trying to develop oxytocin-like drugs, but you can't just go and buy it, unfortunately.
I see. But your body, of course, is capable, and in most people does produce, right, oxytocin. If
you didn't, you'd be dead. We really need to have oxytocin in our bloodstreams, yeah.
But can you increase the amount that's in your, by, certain types of exercises, if you will, increase the amount of oxytocin that you have?
Well, sort of. It's really easy to think about, I don't have enough oxytocin, I want more. It's a little more complicated. Remember I talked about the receptors in the brain? Well, the receptors are structures in the cell that allow the cell to take in and use the oxytocin. And it seems to be the case that our early experience, especially mothering, as well as genetics, kind of determines the placement of the oxytocin receptors, the number of oxytocin receptors, and how sensitive they are. So probably, and scientists don't know this yet, but I think probably what happens is we all kind of produce about the same amount when it comes out, but whether our brains take it up or not depends on a lot of things. And another analogy is depression and serotonin. They have found that if you can keep more serotonin circulating in the brain, it improves your mood. So it's not so much that you need to make more, but where it is and how the cells are taking it up seems to be important.
How can you tell? I mean, I don't mean a scientist now, but just the average person. How can a person tell when his or her body is getting a surge of oxytocin? In other words, what does it feel like?
Well, since I started studying this, and I actually, I said you can't get oxytocin. In fact, it used to be possible to purchase it from a laboratory. Don't try this at home, but I did. And that gave me an understanding of what the feeling was, and I've actually now often can tell. I notice that little surge. It may feel like warmth in your chest. When we say we choke up about something, that's a release of oxytocin. When we feel like a sudden rush of love, that's oxytocin. It's something that you can learn to feel. or to recognize, I guess.
Is it something where if a little bit is good, a lot of it is always better, or is it possible to have too much in your body?
I don't know. Well, I think it's possible to have too much in your body if you're inhaling it or taking it externally. You know, our bodies are very complex and beautifully balanced, and it's probably not possible for the body to produce too much. But when you look at social situations, social and interaction, and specifically love and commitment, it's certainly possible that we cannot react enough to oxytocin. We can't feel its effects enough, and that can keep us from really bonding. And I really feel that was the case with me. You know, I was very good at sort of the immediate, sexual and romantic excitement.
A rush of excitement that you get in the early stages of a relationship, right?
Yeah, and I did feel a strong bond to people I was dating, like this feeling of, oh wow, you're the one, I found you. But it didn't seem to sort of like penetrate. And I think that I probably, I don't know how to say it. It's certainly possible to release oxytocin but not really enjoy its bonding effects in a healthy way. That's a good way to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we may only be able to feel bonded to people who reject us, people who are mean.
And I think you said in the book that if you have too little oxytocin in a chronic sense, you're prone to always being stuck at that early relationship stage.
Yes. And then when that's over, you have nothing left. What's supposed to happen is, when I say what's supposed to happen, this seems to be the way evolution intended it, is that, in the early stage, you're very excited. Oh, it's mad passion. You want to be together. And that intensity is very important to get the male and the female to stay together so she can get pregnant and she can have the child, and he's going to help out and take care of her and take care of the child. And after a couple years, all that excitement kind of ebbs, but by this time they should have a very strong oxytocin bond, which allows them to
compensate for that.
Yeah, and also to allow them to focus more on the kids. We always think, oh God, we were so in love, now we have kids, we're not in love. What happened? But, it's just a different kind of love that is kind of what nature intended.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you talk in your book, we may not be able to get too much into this before another break, but I do want to ask you about it. You talk about teaching oxytocin as well as some other hormones and chemicals as part of sex education in school.
Yes.
And that could be something that kids can understand, that, look, that heightened, heated stage is not meant to last forever.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean that that this is the wrong person necessarily, or that you have, quote unquote, fallen out of love.
Yes.
But, unfortunately, the break I mentioned is coming up, but I do want to ask you more about this and some other things when we come back. We've been talking with medical and science writer Susan Kuchinskis, author of The Chemistry of Connection, How the Oxytocin Response Can Help You Find Trust, Intimacy, and Love. This is Relationship Radio, and I'm Jim Duzak.
Talk. That's all we do is talk. If you'd like to talk, call us toll-free right now at 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. That's it. VoiceAmerica.com.
Hi, I'm Jim Duzak, host of Voice America's Relationship Radio. I'm the author of a book called Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment. It's a book that deals not only with divorce, but with how to enhance your marriage and possibly avoid divorce. Every chapter of the book contains real-world information and advice on issues like sex, money, communication, in-law problems, and the temptation to have an affair. For those thinking of separating or filing for divorce, the book explains how to do it the right way. It also deals with the critical issues of life after divorce, including when to start dating again and how to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. If you visit my website, www.attorneyatlove.com, you can read excerpts from all 17 chapters of the book. If you'd like to order the book, the site has direct links to Amazon.com and the other major online booksellers. And You can use the site to contact me. I'd love to hear from you.
Are you ready to grow your business? Listen for the Independent Business Owners Show with your coach, Rick Corrado. This entertaining talk radio program will bring you the tools to help increase your business. You'll learn sales success, time management, lead generation, business development, life balance, and much more. Rick Corrado is here to help you take your business to the next level. Listen for the Independent Business Owners Show, heard live every Monday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, 8 a.m. Pacific on the Voice America Business Network.
The biggest secret about men is that they are far more complicated than we often give them credit for. Join Dr. Chris Blazina as we discover more about the secret lives of men. This is an informative and positive program exploring the various facets of men's lives, from growing up to growing old. The Secret Lives of Men with Dr. Chris Blazina is broadcast live every Tuesday afternoon at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Time on Voice America.
Streaming live, the leader in Internet Talk Radio, VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Relationship Radio with your host, Jim Duzak, an inside look at marriage, divorce, and midlife dating. Now, back to Jim Duzak.
Welcome back. We've been talking today with Susan Kuchinskis, and since I've been spelling everything out, I'm going to spell Susan's last name out, Kuchinskis, Susan Kuchinskis, author of The Chemistry of Connection. And I've mentioned Susan's website, hugthemonkey.com. By the way, how did your website get that name?
It's a slightly long story. Harry Harlow was a psychologist working in the 50s and 60s. He was the person who really showed how essential mothering is to infants. He worked with monkeys, not humans, and he deprived them of physical contact, and they did miserably without it. And I had a dream about these poor, sad, lonely monkeys, and I just woke up saying, hug the monkey. So it's sort of an acknowledgement that we all need contact, connection, physical and emotional love.
And that is, in infants, that is the first source of the oxytocin response, right?
Yes.
The feeling that they get from their own mother. Yes. But I wanted to mention that your website, I said before that it's a really good website, and it has a lot of what I think are really intriguing articles in it that you've been, some of them I guess are your own, and some of them you've discovered from other sources, but the headlines alone are kind of intriguing, and maybe you could give a quick summary of what some of these things mean. One of the things in your website is that it says why a woman should never mother her husband.
Yeah. So the website it's a blog, and it's a mix of comments on articles in the popular media, scientific studies, things from journals, as well as some of my own thoughts. So why you should never mother your husband is because, well, it's a little complicated. Male bonding seems to be a little different from female bonding. Mm-hmm. It seems to have, and that's due to vasopressin.
We're talking about bonding with other males as opposed to bonding with...
No, I'm sorry, Jim. The way a man loves a woman is a little different, or his children is a little different from the way the woman loves a man and her children, because a man's is influenced by vasopressin, which is an oxytocin-like substance that is a bit more aggressive. Mm-hmm. In animals, it stimulates protective behavior. It makes the animal a little less trusting, a little more guarded. And so male bonding seems to need a little bit of that protection. A man, this sounds like so corny and so stereotypical, but male bonding seems to benefit from having the ability to do a job, to protect, to care for in a more, physical, alert way rather than a, totally comfy way. So if a woman, and whereas female bonding is more nurturing. I hate to make these generalizations,
right,
but I'm just going to do it. Okay, so if a woman mothers her husband, she's not, and makes him into her baby, she's not giving him the opportunity to be the strong protector, so she may actually be kind of weakening their bond, or his bond to her.
And the guy may really resent it, and yet he may feel, you know, like he it's hard to say.
Unless he loves it.
Yeah, exactly. It's that's interesting. How about this? This was another headline from your blog. Why it takes women longer than men to get close. What does that mean?
Okay. Well, you know, we have to look back to evolution, like why would all this behavior have happened? And anthropologists and evolutionary biologists think that because a woman has to invest, you know, 9 months and longer to gestate a child and take care of it, and she's using a lot of her body resources to grow this child and then to feed it after it's born, it's very important that she make a good decision about who she's going to invest that time with, whose sperm, whose genetics she's going to make that investment. And part of that should be, you know, is he going to be around to protect and care for her and the child? Is he going to cooperate in raising the child? So whereas a male, you know, his investment is not that big. You know, he impregnates a woman. If she dies, there's another one, just genetically speaking in terms of evolution. So it's important. It's a much greater commitment of her physical resources for a woman to bear a man's child. So she needs to have taken the time just to check this man out as, you know, making sure he's going to be a good mate for her.
And I guess that leads to another headline that I saw that says the oxytocin trap, why a woman should date 3 men at the same time and not have sex with any of them. That's pretty
now that was
provocative.
I can't take credit for that. That was my comment on somebody else's sort of dating and relationship article. And her premise, and I don't think it's a bad one, is that because women are so prone to the effects of oxytocin, it's very easy for us to feel bonded to somebody that we've dated a couple times, that we've kissed, you know, maybe we've just held hands. So she felt that if you date more than one person at a time, you know, that sort of bonding effect is going to be kind of spread out, so it won't be as easy to get so attached to somebody before we've had time to get to know him.
You're sort of training your body to control.
I don't think it's training your body to control so much as just spreading it around. You know, if I feel that nice oxytocin feeling with you tonight, and tomorrow night I feel that nice oxytocin with Fred, and then on Saturday I feel that nice oxytocin feeling with George, I kind of realize intellectually that, oh, that's a nice feeling I have with you guys, but it's not so likely that I'm going to go, George, you are the one.
Well, you know, really, there's something to that.
Yeah.
But, you know, going from nice feelings to what we typically think of as not so nice feelings, there was one other headline I wanted to ask you about. It said, "It feels good to fight." Do you remember that one?
No.
Okay, then we'll forget that one. Maybe I wrote that down wrong. But how about this?
Probably didn't,
we end up marrying our parents.
4 years.
I'm sorry?
I've written a lot of posts over the last 4 years.
Sure you have.
Yeah.
How about, do we end up marrying our parents?
Oh, boy, do we ever. Yeah.
What does oxytocin have to do with it?
Yeah. Well, okay, so let's talk again about how the oxytocin response develops in as we are mothered. So the kind of mothering we get, really, and whether that's from our biological mother, a non-biological mother, or another person who is our primary caregiver, that actually shapes the oxytocin response in our brain. So there's all different ways that can develop. And so in the first 3 years of life, we're not really conscious. We don't have speech. We don't even make, conscious memories. But that's when the oxytocin response is being shaped. So we tend to want to recreate that in our adult relationships. If, however my mother was to me, that was my first experience of love. So that's sort of how I'm defining love. Not consciously, but, neurochemically. That's what my body thinks of as love. So that's what I'm going to look for unconsciously. And that's why, and it can be very subtle, nonverbal signals, but that's why so often, we meet somebody and we fall in love and then we go, wow, you're just like my mom, or you're just like my dad.
That's fascinating stuff, and it's the basis of at least one school of psychology called imago psychotherapy that says that we're unconsciously seeking the image of our mother or father in our any potential mate or a love interest. So it's I think there's something there. With all the research that everything that you've done to popularize, if you will, the concept of oxytocin and all the scientific work that's going on around the world, is there still a lot that we don't know about oxytocin? In other words, where do you think the research is going to be going over the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think, as I said, there's a lot of interest and excitement right now about using oxytocin to treat a lot of psychiatric conditions. And so there's thinking that these psychiatric conditions may, at least in part, be the result of the brain's improper processing or inability to use oxytocin. Social anxiety disorder, that totally makes sense. I'm anxious about people, I can't get close, but also schizophrenia, also autism spectrum disorder. So I think there's going to continue to be a lot of research. One researcher even found that an application of oxytocin to the female genitals decreased the symptoms of menopause. It's good for all sorts of stuff. So I think using it, understanding what normal oxytocin processing is and how that can go wrong is going to be huge. They're going to continue to do experiments testing what happens with humans when we do all sorts of social interaction, if we've inhaled oxytocin or not. I think we're also going to begin to understand that oxytocin is the basis of a lot of other positive feelings, such as religious feeling, the pleasure we get from inanimate objects or activities like gardening.
You talked about pets in your book too.
Oh yeah. Well, that's kind of already been shown that there was only one study, and I'd love to see more work done on this. There was one study that found that pet owners, when they interacted with their dogs, both the dog and the person had elevated levels of oxytocin in the blood, which they think is the same as having it in the brain. Yeah.
Susan, we've talked about a lot of things, but if you could leave our listeners with one or two key concepts about oxytocin, what would they be? Something just to be able to keep in their mind and make it, separate it from other hormones and chemicals and so forth.
Okay. Oxytocin is the key to love, bonding, and connection. The oxytocin response develops after birth, so we don't all develop a healthy oxytocin response. But because our brains are plastic and can change, we can change and build the oxytocin response at any time in our life.
And you can do that through closer human relationships, or, as we're saying, relationships with pets and other things?
Yeah, well, the key is it has to be experiential. You're not going to think your way out of this one. You have to find ways to experience trust, and maybe that starts with a pet. Maybe it starts with a really good therapist. But if you can have one trusting relationship, you can learn to have more.
It's really fascinating stuff. I think you found certainly the right subject for you, but also maybe the right subject for all of us. Because it speaks to so many things. I wish we could talk for the next hour or so, because this is so fascinating.
Me too.
We have to go to one final break. I want to thank our guest, medical and science writer Susan Kachinskas, for sharing so many great insights with us today. Susan's website, once again, is www.hugthemonkey.com, and her book is The Chemistry of Connection, How the Oxytocin Response Can Help You Find Trust, Intimacy, and Love. Susan, it's been such a pleasure. Thanks again.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Jim.
But when we come back in 2 minutes, I'll tell you why playing detective can be playing with fire. I'm Jim Duzak, and this is Relationship Radio.
Have you ever thought about having your own Internet talk show? Well, if you said yes, then click About Us. Then click Be a Host to get more information. Or just call Jeff Spinard at 480-294-6417.
Say that again?
480-294-6417. VoiceAmerica.com.
Hi, I'm Jim Duzak, host of Voice America's Relationship Radio. I'm the author of a book called Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment. It's a book that deals not only with divorce, but with how to enhance your marriage and possibly avoid divorce. Every chapter of the book contains real-world information and advice on issues like sex, money, communication, in-law problems, and the temptation to have an affair. For those thinking of separating or filing for divorce, the book explains how to do it the right way. It also deals with the critical issues of life after divorce, including when to start dating again and how to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. If you visit my website, www.attorneyatlove.com, you can read excerpts from all 17 chapters of the book. If you'd like to order the book, the site has direct links to Amazon.com and the other major online booksellers. And you can use the site to contact me. I'd love to hear from you.
Total career success. What does it mean to you? Voice America presents a radio program dedicated to help you achieve your career goal. Even in times of economic uncertainty, you can achieve your financial goals. Whether you're a college grad, new in the working environment, or a top-level executive, you will benefit from the practical and proven advice on job search and career advancement. Join Ken and Cheryl Dawson every Monday at 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern for Total Career Success on Voice America.
Wake up with a unique daily show. Listen for Mitchell John in the morning. Mitchell will bring you news, sports, and stock news from yesterday. You'll hear interviews from high-profile figures from the world of sports, entertainment, politics, and authors. Mitchell will talk to people throughout America. This is a show that throws right down the center. It's fun, information, and yes, even a little bit of music. Catch Mitchell John in the morning at 6 a.m. Pacific Time, Mondays, Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays on Voice America, and Thursdays on the Voice America Business Network.
The Internet's #1 talk station. #1 talk station. VoiceAmerica.com.
You're listening to Relationship Radio with your host, Jim Duzak, an inside look at marriage, divorce, and midlife dating. Now, back to Jim Duzak.
Welcome back to Relationship Radio. I mentioned earlier that in addition to being an author and a talk show host, I'm a lawyer. Since lawyers always love to plead their case, I call the final segment of each show my closing argument. What I try to do each week in the closing argument is to make my case, so to speak, on a particular relationship issue and offer some advice that you might be able to use right now. The issue I'll be discussing today is why playing detective can be playing with fire. A few weeks ago, for those of you who have been listening regularly, we had Dr. Nancy Kalish on the show. You may remember that Dr. Kalish is a psychology professor who, for the past 15 years, has studied the phenomenon of people who reunite with lost lovers from the past, or at least try to. It's certainly never been easier to track a person down. Anyone with a computer and some basic internet research skills can learn more about someone in 10 minutes than the famous movie detectives of the 1940s could in 2 weeks. And that's assuming that the person you're looking for hasn't done your work for you by voluntarily putting all his personal information on Facebook, MySpace, Classmates.com, or other social networking sites. There's no question that it's common to wonder what an old boyfriend or girlfriend is doing now, and tempting to want to contact the person. But as Dr. Kalish emphasized on the show, if one or both of you is currently married, don't even think about doing it. I agree 100% with Dr. Kalish on this. I've known a fair number of married people who have contacted or been contacted by ex-lovers, and they all tell a similar story. The first contact is typically an innocent-sounding email that explains that he or she stumbled on the other person's name while doing a totally unrelated search, which of course triggered a curiosity about what he or she is doing these days. If the response to that first tentative email is at all encouraging, the next message will be a bit warmer in tone, alluding to happy memories and suggesting that it might be fun to meet for lunch sometime. Well, why not? We're just friends now. The lunch always seems to be on a day when both parties have the time to linger a while. Hey, we have a lot to catch up on. After the usual exchange of information and life events, the conversation invariably turns to their past relationship, or at least the parts they prefer to remember. The longer the conversation continues, the more each person starts feeling those old feelings, the kind of feelings that seem lacking in his or her marriage these days. This is dangerous territory. What is happening at that lunch and at any subsequent lunches or meetings is a battle between illusion and reality. And illusion will always win that battle. I say illusion because with a lost lover, we're not looking at him or her as a real person, the way we look at our spouse, but rather as an embodiment of a happier past. We conveniently forget that there were good reasons why the relationship with that person ended, or we gloss over those reasons by believing we must have made a mistake in breaking up, that if we had just given it a little more time, we would have gotten it right. The reality of your current marriage may or may not be a happy one. There may be problems, even big problems, that need fixing. But they're not going to be fixed by escaping into your past, a past that probably was idyllic only in your imagination. Nor are your problems going to be fixed by forcing your real-life spouse to compete with an illusion. Even if the contacts with your ex-lover don't lead to an affair, they're likely to engender an increasing dissatisfaction with your marriage, or even a resentment of your spouse for depriving you of the life you think you were meant to live. I'm not saying that if you're dissatisfied with the way your marriage is going, you should accept it without complaint. But I am saying that the way to improve your current reality is by recognizing your problems and confronting them directly, not by embracing an illusion. By the way, according to Dr. Kalish, you should be careful about looking up an old boyfriend or girlfriend even if neither of you is married. If you were to get back together and then break up a second time, it could be particularly devastating because it would be the loss of a dream that may have kept you going during a lot of tough times. Apparently, the lost love reunions that have the best chance of success are the ones between unmarried people whose first romance ended not because of a fight or an infidelity, but because one person moved a long way away to go to college or accepted a job offer in another state or was shipped overseas by the military. In other words, if neither person did anything wrong to cause the initial breakup, and both people want to give it another chance, the likelihood of success the second time around is very high. So I guess the bottom line in all this is, if either of you is married, don't go there. If you're both unmarried, but there was an unhappy breakup the first time around, proceed with caution. And if you're both unmarried and the first breakup was for reasons mostly beyond your control, go for it. But I think the real key issue there is when people are married. You know, it is really, as I say, dangerous territory, and as I said, you're playing with fire. I want to mention a couple of other things before we wrap up. I mentioned earlier that I have a book out called Midlife Divorce and the Rebirth of Commitment. And for those of you who are in book clubs or other reading groups, particularly clubs that read nonfiction books, I'd like to extend a special offer. If your club chooses my book as your book of the month, I'll be happy to appear by telephone at your meeting and speak to the members either individually or by speakerphone. And if your club meets anywhere in southern Arizona, I'll appear in person. The way to do it is just to email me. The address again is jim@attorneyatlove.com, and we'll work out the details. And Attorney at Love is spelled ATTORNEYATLOVE, jim@attorneyatlove.com. I'd like to say that our next guest is, for the show of May 15th, is going to be Beverly Jewell. Beverly is a marriage counselor with a rather unusual type of practice. She works with a multi-office law firm in Southern California that specializes in collaborative divorce. Collaborative divorce is a movement that's really catching on, especially since Robin Williams and his wife decided to use collaborative divorce law firms when they got divorced last year. I'm not going to mislead you. Divorce is never painless, but a collaborative divorce can eliminate about 90% of the pain, plus save the divorcing couple a lot of money. And Beverly Jewell will explain how it all works. It is an unusual concept. As I mentioned, she's a marriage counselor who works for a law firm. And the law firm that does this, and it's not the only law firm in the country that does it, they're springing up all over. In addition to having people like Beverly Jewell, therapists, work for them, they also have some financial advisors who give independent financial advice to the people who are getting divorced. It's really an interesting concept, and as I mentioned, the Robin Williams divorce gave it some extra credibility and publicity, and I think opened up a lot of people's eyes to what it is. We'll also find out what the difference is between that and divorce mediation, because some of this sounds similar to divorce mediation, but there really are some differences. Anyway, that's next Friday, May 15th, here on Relationship Radio. Until then, have a great weekend and spread some love around. I'm Jim Duzak. Goodbye for now.
Thanks again for joining us this week on Relationship Radio with Jim Duzak. Please join us again next Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Pacific Time on Voice America. Have a great weekend.
Thanks again for listening to the preceding program, brought to you on the Voice America Variety Channel. For more information about our network and to check out additional show hosts and topics of interest, please visit VoiceAmericaVariety.com. The Voice America Talk Radio Network is the worldwide leader in